It's really good to be sharing again this morning. I'm going to give the same spiel that I do. I am in the book of Luke until it finishes, I guess. I don't know, until something happens. Till I get too many complaints in email that I'm still talking about Luke. I'm going to talk about Luke. And we're moving on to a new chapter and a new story this morning. But first, let me tell you a different story. A number of years ago, I remember this trip that I was on, and I was in the country of Ecuador. Specifically, we were spending time in the capital city of Quito, and for those of you that haven't been there, aren't familiar, it is a very elevated country. I don't mean fancy, I mean like it's high. We were at about 10,000, 9,000, somewhere in there, feet above sea level. That was where we lived and worked. And it was a fantastic week. We were involved in community service projects. We were building relationships with people. Specifically, the group that I was leading, in various forms, we had been working with the same group of friends in Quito for decades. And this was just one opportunity we had among many to go spend time with them. So it was a great week. And yet, for some reason, despite all the amazing things that we experienced that week, this specific story seems to stay with me for some reason. At the end of the week, after all that we had experienced, we decided we were going to rent a bus and a bus driver, and we were going to drive deeper into the mountains and go to this place called El Refugio, which I think means the refuge. And the plan there was to do some meditating, to do some silent reflection, to go hiking up into the clouds, and to really just think about all that we had experienced that week. And so we're sitting on the bus, relaxing. I'm looking at the scenery go by, and our guide that we had been getting to know that week, he gets up out of his seat, he walks back to me, sits down, and with a grin, he says, "Do you like donuts?" And there's obviously only one answer to that. Even if you're not really a fan of donuts, you're not going to say no in that moment. The reason he decided to ask me that was because all week long we had been bonding over our shared love of food. We'd been talking about food when we were sitting on the bus. We would talk about different dishes. And he said, I have an idea. Okay, as we're driving to the refuge, there's actually this really famous donut place. I bet you if we ask the bus driver really nicely, maybe we'll do a little detour and we'll go get some donuts. And he started to describe these donuts to me, and they were these small, pillowy, cinnamon sugar donuts, and they came with a container of caramel on the side, because you have to dip donuts in caramel, apparently. That was their logic. And so I immediately agree. The guide walks back up to the bus driver, and they start talking a little bit in Spanish. And then I see the bus driver look up in his rearview mirror, look at me, and give a big thumbs up and say, "Yeah, let's go get some donuts." The guide comes back and says he's totally happy to do this detour, but we have to buy him some donuts as well. That's a good trade. Makes sense. So we go into this little village, and by little village, I mean little, like maybe a dozen houses max. And they're very small, 1-2 room kind of houses, dirt roads, and there's no donut shop in sight anywhere. You know, like there's no neon sign. There's not the big like sign on the pole, donuts here. There's not even, a building that has like a big glass window that you can see the donut display there. There's not a grocery store. And so I feel like maybe we've been tricked a little bit. But we stop. We hop off the bus, and the guide brings me around to behind this house, and he knocks on a sliding glass window. This little old Ecuadorian lady, she opens the door, they exchange some pleasantries, and we're invited inside. And we wait for our order of 2 bags of donuts and 2 containers of caramel for dipping. If you've never met someone from Ecuador, or if you've never been there, I wish I had a picture to show you. I looked really hard this week, and I can't seem to find it. But I have a picture of myself that shows just how much I don't fit in their houses. I think their houses are made just about 1 or 2 inches shorter than I am. And so I have a picture of me really excited, but my head's kind of like this, waiting for these donuts in this lady's living room. And so I wait, and then finally she comes out of what I think was a kitchen, I don't know. She opens the door, and she's holding this steaming brown paper bag of donuts. They're hot, they smell, like yeasty and donutty, and you can smell the cinnamon and sugar. And so I hold the 2 bags in one hand, and I balance the 2 containers of caramel in the other hand, and I hop back on the bus. We do the trade, and we start eating donuts as we head on our trip. Now, it might have been the lack of oxygen that you have at 10,000, 11,000 feet above sea level. But these were the best donuts I've ever had. These were amazing. I wouldn't have been surprised if the lady walked into the kitchen and there was Jesus with an apron on making donuts for everybody. It had to be. It had to be. It was just, they were amazing. Oh my goodness, these donuts were phenomenal. And as silly as it is, and as amazing as that trip was, that's a moment that's never going to leave me. These specific donuts. But here's the problem. No matter how hard I try to recreate those donuts, or I try to find another donut shop that's similar, I'm not going to have them again. It's not going to happen. This was this specific moment of having 10,000-foot donuts. And that's all it was. There's this pompous French word, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce it, but terroir is the word. And terroir is this idea that food is supposed to taste like where it comes from. Based on the soil type, on the climate, on the minerals, on the type of rain it gets, all of the various factors of geography makes food taste the way it does. For me, it's something exciting about traveling for food, because just because we have had chicken before doesn't mean I've had it in this location, or in this country, or from this farm, because all of those various factors are different. It's something that chefs and farmers and foodies adore, and it's something that fast food chains hate. Right? Because none of you have gone to McDonald's and have said, I really hope the potatoes taste a little more like the place I'm going. Right? That's not a thing that you're hoping for. And so fast food chains, they spend millions of dollars to try to remove all of those factors and just say, we want it to be the same. We don't want it to taste like here or taste like here. We want it to be the exact same everywhere I go. And this is my joy and frustration in life of having these food moments and not being able to take them back with me. Having these moments of oh my goodness, this is amazing, and I can't bring it back with me. I'll never be able to recreate them. Those donuts in a little village in Ecuador in a house that I couldn't fit in was just meant for that moment and that moment alone. So why am I talking about food so much? Well, because I like food. I hope you do as well. But also, I'd like to see what the Bible has to say about 10,000-foot donuts. There's a story that connects here. Luke says, Jesus took along Peter, John, and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face became different, and his clothes became white and gleaming. And behold, two men were talking with him. And they were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory. And so Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good that we're here. Let's make 3 memorials. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. And not realizing what he was saying. But while he was saying this, a cloud formed and began to overshadow them, and they were afraid as they entered into the cloud. And then a voice came from that cloud saying, This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him. And when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone. On the next day, when they came down from the mountain, a large crowd met the disciples. And a man from the crowd shouted, saying, Teachers, I beg you to look at my son, because he's my only son, and a spirit is seizing him, and he suddenly screams and convulses, and only with difficulty does it leave him. I begged your other disciples to do something about this, and they couldn't fix it. There's nothing they could do about it. Luke chapter 9. As we read through the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there's a pattern that emerges, and that is that these authors, they don't write about Jesus' life and ministry chronologically. They move stories around in different orders. And I don't think that's because they don't remember the actual order it happened in. I think they're doing that because they want to emphasize something specific to the perspective they have on Jesus. And so if they move this story, it highlights something else. If they put it after a story or before or connect it this way, then it's going to highlight something different. It's them saying, hey, I'm going to focus on this aspect of Jesus, and you can focus on other aspects, but we'll use the same stories. And yet, despite that, I think it's amazing that all 4 gospel writers, despite their unique perspective and their unique goal, they have these 2 stories back to back in all of them. For some reason, these 4 authors decide that these stories need to be connected in a unique way. The story of Jesus on the mountain and a sick boy the next day are connected. The story of Jesus glowing and the disciples having this mountaintop moment are always connected to this story of the disciples failing at helping someone that's struggling. All 4 Gospels have these connected. And so I don't feel like that's a coincidence. If they were willing to move stories around and make different connections, they could have done that here. But for some reason, all of these authors say these stories need to be connected. They need to be beside each other in that order because it shows us something really important. The first story, a literal mountaintop moment, is deeply connected to a story of humans trying to do something and struggling. And so this morning, I'd really just like to share a few reflections on the stories, on what I noticed and how maybe they connect to donuts on a mountain. First reflection, mountaintop moments are meant for a specific moment in time. Don't try to return to that mountain. Because really, it's such a human experience for the disciples to see the glory of God, to have this amazing literal and spiritual mountaintop moment. And what is their reaction? We got to memorialize this, right? We have to remember this. If it happened today, they would have pulled their iPhones out and started filming like we do at a concert, right? Because you want to remember that. And more than just remember it, you want to be able to return to the feelings you got from it. And so in their cultural context, they decide, let's set up memorials. And maybe that was to remember it, but I think more specifically for them, I wonder if they were looking at it like, man, if we start struggling in our faith, if we have a difficult season of life, then we know where to go again to get energized, right? We go up the same mountain, we look for that memorial, and obviously God's going to show up in the exact same way that God did before. If I just have that same experience that impacted me years ago, then I'll get back on track. You know, good things will happen again. And I think that's a really human experience. If I just recreate that moment, God will show up and I'll be energized again. But like my 10,000-foot donuts and terroir, I think divine encounters are a unique moment in time. Sure, they can be a memory. I mean, I've spoken before about how memories are powerful, how we can remember how God has showed up for us in the past. But it's not something that I think we can recreate. Just like food being unique to a soil and a climate and a rain type and a location, maybe the soil in our life has changed in this new season. The thing that we connected to God with in that season, maybe it was just for that season, and we need to find something new for this season. Mountaintop experiences are meant for a specific moment. Don't try to return to that same mountain in that exact same way. Here's my second reflection. It's this. Mountaintop moments are given so that we can go into the world and do something. Mountaintop moments are given to us so that we can leave the mountain. Remember, I said I don't think it's a coincidence that those two stories are connected. One story of a mountaintop experience, one story about the disciples going into ministry and trying to help somebody. But I also think it's important to notice in the story that there's a profound detail in it. They fail. They fail at it. I think it would be way too binary if we were to say, oh, here's the story of the disciples. They have this big God moment, and then they're energized, they go into the world, and they accomplish everything they ever hoped to accomplish. Like, that's way too binary. That doesn't fit the experiences I have in life. Life is way more complex than that. And so I really think it's a beautiful detail that they are energized on this mountain. The disciples are immediately thrown into ministry, into serving the world, and then they don't do so well at it. There's some pain there. There's some personal struggle that happens. And yet, I think it was a good moment for them. I think mountaintop moments are created so that we can go into the world and do something. You know, if God energizes us with divine presence, then God is saying, hey, two things might happen. One, you're going to have an opportunity to do something with that energy. And second, maybe I'm giving you this energy because you're going to go through some personal struggles. Maybe that's what the mountaintop moment is for. Isn't just so that we can continually live on the mountaintop, but we can say, hey, now I need to do something, or I have some extra energy when I'm struggling. Let me find a quote here from N.T. Wright. N.T. Wright puts it this way. For many of us, dramatic visions and spiritual experiences and mountaintop moments are balanced by huge demands. Let me say it again. For many, dramatic visions and spiritual experiences and mountaintop moments are balanced by huge demands. The more open we are to God and the different dimensions of God's glory, the more open we are to the pain of the world. And it's noticing that pain and struggle that brings us into action in the world, in our neighborhoods, at work, in our families, in our own lives. Mountaintop moments are meant to create action. But second, mountaintop moments are also given to us so that we, when we face painful situations, we have that extra divine presence and energy in our lives to get us through that. Life isn't binary. God moments, pain, personal failures, and action are all intertwined, and all four gospel writers want them to be intertwined. Here's my last reflection. If we want a mountaintop moment with God, we should be expecting to also experience the pains of life. But most of us, often I think we choose the plateau. Here's what I mean by that. Anthony Bourdain, he was a chef, author, TV host. He says this again about food, but I think it connects to spiritual matters as well. He says, food began to taste bland when we linked food with convenience. Before major grocery stores, we had strawberries for 2 months out of the year? And then we didn't have strawberries. We had these amazing red all the way through strawberries, this amazing moment in time. Maybe I like food a little bit too much, but this amazing, oh, that is the best strawberry I've ever had. Maybe you jar some, maybe you make jam with it and you try to extend it a bit, but there's always that moment, in my family at least, where we look in the freezer at our jam and we're on the last one, and now we got to go without. But for Anthony Bourdain, he says, instead of having this amazing moment in time for 2 months and then dealing with the lack thereof, instead, what do our grocery stores have, right? We have these bland, mediocre strawberries 365 days a year. It's convenient, but it's not a moment. It's not terroir. It's not donuts at 10,000 feet. It's mediocrity. And I think when I reflected this week on my own life, there's this funny paradox that happens, okay? On one hand, I pray to God and I say, God, I really want you to show up in my life. I really want to have these mountaintop moments, these divine experiences. I want you to energize me. I want you to be present in our church service. But can we skip the seasons where I don't feel that? You know, can we skip over the demand to action? Can we skip over the painful feelings that come out of that? I want the strawberry season, but I don't want winter when strawberries aren't there anymore. And so often what I choose personally, and maybe you're there with me, is plateauing. It seems a little bit easier. I don't have those amazing moments with God, but I'm not experiencing the pain, and the action is just mediocrity for 365 days a year. And it's been really fascinating for me to reflect on that this week, to go, oh, I don't think I can have both. If I want to have a mountaintop moment with my Creator, if I want to be energized by the divine, then maybe there's a huge demand there. And that demand is maybe I'm going to experience some pain. And maybe I'm going to be called to action, to do something with that energy I've been given. So why am I telling all of you this? Well, in my spiritual walk with God, in my journeying through life, I think it's a really important thing for me to reflect on. The phrase, careful what you wish for, seems to come to my mind of if I'm praying to God of, I want this moment with you. Often when I pray before church on Sundays, I say, hey, I want us to feel God's presence here. Am I really okay with also asking that we should then have action involved and we might have some painful moments as a church? It's a scarier prayer now. If I'm saying, God, I really want this mountaintop moment, I want 10,000-foot donuts, maybe that means I'm not going to experience that same moment with God again because that was just one moment in time. And there'll be a new moment for me to come back to. Do I actually want to pray that prayer, or would I rather just have the fast food model of mediocrity at all times? And if I'm honest, I don't know where I stand on that. I would love to sit here and say, I want those mountaintop moments, and I'm okay with the pain and the struggle and the action that comes with it. But there are also weeks where I say, that just sounds like a lot. Some weeks I feel like I'm more of a plateau person, and I think that's okay. I think that's okay to admit. The point of my reflections this morning is in that word, to reflect. Where am I right now? Am I in a plateau? Am I eating mediocre strawberries all 365 days a year? Or do I want to experience something else in my faith and life? And if I want to experience mountaintop moments connecting with God, then there's a demand that comes with it.